Thanks for joining me on episode 339 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Daryl Lyons, author of 18 to 80. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the right behavior with your money is key to doing that. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
It's about finding those things that you can do and doing them as well as you can possibly do them. It's about consistently chasing excellence and constantly demanding that you're a little better today than you were yesterday.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about investing in yourself through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about how excellence isn't huge leaps, but small steps. Why execution over time is more reliable than huge leaps, and why you do need to do the little things to really excel.
You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast.
One of the mistakes that I've seen people make over the years is looking for excellence in these big, giant leaps. They think to themselves that the way that somebody becomes great at something involves some sort of overnight success, some sort of huge lucky break, some sort of great big jump in skill or ability or knowledge. And they constantly are looking for that big thing that can really make a difference in their life. And I'm not going to say that it's impossible. I'm not going to say that it never happens, that something big comes along and really makes a change in your life. I mean, it is true that there are people that come into sudden wealth or sudden resources that perhaps they wouldn't have before, and it does make a huge difference in their life. It's true, it does happen, but it's actually exceedingly rare. And the other thing about it is, a lot of times when it does happen, the person hasn't laid the ground for that success. They haven't prepared the knowledge and the skills and the abilities that it takes to sustain that. And so instead of coming along and creating excellence, a lot of times that sudden influx of ability or knowledge or wealth creates struggle. I actually argue that more often than not, excellence is achieved not in these huge leaps, but through the accumulation of many small steps. It's less about suddenly becoming perfect than it is about consistently taking the next step to push yourself just one step beyond your comfort zone and begin to practice with deliberate intention, getting better and better at the things that you are called to do, until over time, that series of small steps, you look back and you realize that you come a tremendous distance from where you started. You know, execution over time, this step-by-step process of getting a little bit better every single day is more likely to give you a reliable set of excellent skills than looking for these huge leaps. There's example after example of whether it's Olympic athletes, whether it's athletic teams, or whether it's businessmen and small business owners, and anything you can think of. Even parenting, something that a lot of times we don't think of as a skill-based thing. The truth is, a lot of times you're better with your third child than you were with your first child, not because the third child is better or worse, but because you've had some practice. You've gone through the act of parenting. You've learned from some of your own mistakes, and Lord knows as parents, we make enough of them. All of these things, when you look at execution over time, just getting 1% better each and every day or week or month means that eventually you've doubled or tripled your skills. You've gotten better and better and better over time. And this is why, even though, you'll hear people say, don't sweat the small stuff. And I agree. There's a lot of things that we put a lot of emphasis on that really and truly are the small stuff. They're not important. They don't matter. But you do need to do the little things really, really well to excel. It's not about sweating the small stuff. It's not about worrying about things that you have no control over or that really aren't that big of a deal in the larger scheme of things. It's about finding those things that you can do and doing them as well as you can possibly do them. It's about consistently chasing excellence and constantly demanding that you're a little better today than you were yesterday. If you do that and you do that over time, then what happens is you begin to build a habit of pursuing excellence. You begin to build a routine of pursuing excellence. Your brain and your body begin to come into alignment, and you begin to grow in the direction of excellence. You begin to get better each and every day. I think about martial arts. I was in martial arts for a number of years whenever I was growing up, and the truth is, part of what you do when you do martial arts is these consistent practices. Let's take kata as an example, which is a way of doing moves in exactly the same way over and over and over again in almost a performance. And in fact, it is used by some folks as a performance activity. And that set of doing that routine over and over and over and over the same way, time after time after time, demanding that you do the blocks right, you do the kicks right, you do the punches right. Over time, what happens is your body and your brain begins to learn that pattern, and you can begin to do it without even thinking about it. It's kind of I got to work and I was driving and I don't even know the route that I took. I don't remember seeing anything on the way because your brain does it on autopilot. The same thing happens when it comes to achieving excellence. As you begin to establish patterns and routines, your brain begins to excel at those things. However, you've got to constantly be striving for improvement. One thing that happens is a lot of times we kind of develop this ability to do things just good enough to get by. We just kind of do our job well enough that we don't get fired. But we don't actually look for the ways to excel in our job, to go one step beyond, to do things better than we did yesterday. And that's really what I'm talking about when I say excelling at the little things. You have to constantly find ways to take the things that you did yesterday and do them just a tiny bit better today. And if you do that consistently over time and long enough, excellence will always follow. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.